My name is Josephine Marsh, and I turned 34 at my mother's dining room table. The candles weren't even lit yet when my mother leaned toward my father and whispered just loud enough for me to catch it. "Since everyone's here, have your son changed the locks at her apartment?" Her apartment. Mine. The one I bought with my own money. The one my 7-year-old son sleeps in. My father nodded without looking up from his plate. My brother Trent set down his fork, mumbled something about a phone call, and walked out with his key ring still in his hand. Everyone else kept passing the potatoes. I smiled and complimented the pot roast. An hour later, Trent came back through that front door with a face the color of hospital linens, leaned down to my mother's ear, and whispered, "Mom, there." He never finished the sentence. Here's what nobody at that table knew. I already understood exactly what was waiting for him in my parking lot because I had spent 6 weeks quietly building it. Ever since a declined debit card at a pharmacy counter started me pulling a thread that ended inside a manila folder in my mother's china cabinet and showed me what my parents had been doing to me for 12 years. Let me take you back to the beginning. 6 weeks before that dinner, my life was small and good in mine. I work nights as a charge nurse in the emergency department at Good Samaritan, which means I know how to stay level while everything around me is screaming. 12-hour shifts, then home to my condo in a quiet complex called Birchwood Court, 15 minutes from the house I grew up in. I bought that condo 4 years earlier, and I can still remember exactly what it felt like turning the key for the first time, 29 years old, and it was the first door in my life that belonged only to me. My son Eli was 7 that summer, all elbows and questions, learning to ride his bike in the parking lot while my neighbor Sam yelled encouragement from his porch. Sam Ferris is 67, a retired police sergeant with 30 years on the job, a slow porch swing, and an old basset hound named Pretzel who supervises the whole complex from the shade. Tuesdays I drove across town for dinner at my parents' house, because Tuesday dinner was on my mother's calendar, and things on my mother's calendar happened whether you wanted them to or not. That week she called me twice about my birthday. "We're doing it here, honey. Family only." Her voice had a sweetness I hadn't heard since I was a kid. My mother has planned every holiday my family has ever had, but she hadn't thrown me a birthday dinner since I was 12. I told myself people soften. I told myself 62 does that to a woman. Then I finished the dishes, checked on Eli, and folded the thought away the way you fold a shirt you'll never wear. 2 days later, a pharmacy card reader unfolded it for me. You should know what my role in the Colton family actually was, because it wasn't daughter, it was fixer. At 16, I was the one reading the water bill at the kitchen table because my father's eyes got tired. At 19, I did my parents' taxes for the first time and every spring after. When the furnace died, when the insurance lapsed, when Trent's landlord threatened to evict him, the phone rang in my pocket. My mother had a phrase for it, delivered like a blessing. That's what family does. Looking back, I can count maybe 3 times in my life that sentence arrived without a favor riding shotgun. Here's the part I'm still embarrassed to say out loud. I handled everyone's paperwork except my own. When I turned 18, my father set up a little gray fireproof box in his den and said he'd keep my important documents safe: birth certificate, social security card, the savings bond from my grandmother. It felt like being taken care of. I was a scholarship kid working kitchen shifts through nursing school. I liked believing somebody else was minding the deep stuff so I could mind the double shifts. I paid my rent, then my mortgage, always on time, and never once pulled my own credit report. I know how that sounds coming from a woman who reads lab values for a living. But you don't audit the people who taught you to ride a bike. You just keep showing up on Tuesdays. It took 16 years to learn what else was in that gray box besides my birth certificate. It took one declined debit card to start the lesson. It happened at the pharmacy on a Thursday afternoon. Eli had an ear infection. I had his antibiotics in one hand and my card in the other, and the reader flashed declined in gray letters. I ran it again. Declined. My backup card came up suspected fraud, call issuer. There was a line behind me. I paid with crumpled bills from the bottom of my purse, got Eli his medicine, and sat in my car doing the thing I do at work when a monitor starts screaming. Slow breath, look at the numbers. That night, after Eli was asleep, I finally signed up for one of those free credit monitoring apps I'd always told myself I didn't need. It loaded my file, and I sat there reading my own name like it belonged to a stranger. There was a credit card on my report, opened 2 years earlier. I had never applied for it. Balance, $4,800. 60 days past due. That one delinquent account had dragged my score off a cliff, which is exactly why a nurse with a spotless payment history had just been humiliated over a $14 prescription. My hands were steady. I want that on the record. 12 years in an ER will do that for you. I clicked into the account details expecting some stranger's address in another state. The billing address was a house on Larkin Street. A house I know better than my own. I grew up in it. I did what you're supposed to do, in the order you're supposed to do it. I called the issuing bank, told the fraud department the account wasn't mine, put a 90-day fraud alert on my file, and requested copies of the application and statements. The woman on the phone read me the contact number listed on the account, just to verify. It wasn't mine. It was a landline. I could have recited it in my sleep. It had been my parents' kitchen phone since before I could drive. I thanked her in my calm nurse voice, hung up, and stared at my own reflection in the microwave door. A memory surfaced, one I hadn't touched in years. When I was 27, a few months after Eli was born, I'd gotten a letter about a credit inquiry I didn't recognize. I drove to my parents' house with it in my purse, and my father chuckled and pulled a folded page from that gray box, bank letterhead, an apology, something about a clerical error already resolved. My mother patted my hand. Bank error, sweetheart. Your father already handled it. Go worry about the baby. The alert I'd set expired on its own 90 days later, the way they do. I remember thinking at the time that the letter had looked slightly off, the paper too bright, the logo a shade too blue. Then the baby cried, and I let it go. Sitting in my kitchen 7 years later, I finally let myself finish that thought. That Saturday, Sam was out front fixing a fence latch the HOA had ignored since spring, because Sam fixes things the way other men watch football. He told me a story about a forgery case from his patrol days, where a man's own sister had signed his name better than he could. 30 years on the job taught me one thing, kid, he said, tightening the last screw. Paper never lies. People do. I came within one breath of telling him everything right there at the fence. But I'd been the strong one so long that asking for help feels like undressing in public. So I said something about the HOA instead. My phone rang while Sam was still holding the screwdriver. My mother, bright as a bell. You're still holding Saturday for your birthday, aren't you? Wait, Wednesday? We moved it to Wednesday. Did I tell you? She had not told me. She talked for 4 more minutes about a cake, about my aunt coming, about family being together, and I stood there watching Pretzel sleep and feeling the hair rise on my arms. My mother had not acknowledged my birthday in 22 years. Now she was calling twice a week about one. Sunday night, on a quiet ICU hours shift with the monitors humming and the coffee going cold, I used my break to pull my full credit reports from all 3 bureaus, the real ones. It was worse than one card. There was a card opened years back, another the year after, a department store card, a personal loan for $12,000, paid off and closed, 2 more cards after that. 9 accounts total. 12 years of history. None of it mine. All of it wearing my name like a borrowed coat. I made myself a list, and the dates lined up into a shape I didn't want to see. The first account opened the same month I graduated nursing school, the same month I carried my boxes out of my parents' house for good. Somebody had waited for me to move out, and then, that same week, opened a door behind me with my own name on it. Over the next few days, I turned my kitchen table into a caseboard. Every account got a row opened when, balance what, status which. The totals came out cold and specific, the way I like numbers. Just over $19,000 in open balances rotting under my name. And one detail repeated down the page like a heartbeat. Every single account listed the same mailing address for statements. Not my condo. The house on Larkin Street. For 12 years, every bill, every late notice had been delivered to my childhood bedroom, where I couldn't see it and somebody else could. That's when the thing I'd been calling a mystery quietly became a method. I wrote down the only names that fit every fact. Who had my social security number since birth? Who kept my documents in a gray box? Who controlled the mailbox on Larkin Street? Who answered that landline? I wrote the names, scratched them out, and wrote them again, and my hand wasn't steady that time. My parents. I filed nothing publicly yet, said nothing at Tuesday dinner, changed nothing in my voice. But that week I put a hard freeze on my credit at all 3 bureaus, not an alert, a freeze, the kind where nothing new opens without a pin only I hold. It felt like locking a door from the inside for the first time in my life. 2 days later my mother called, her voice missing some of its sweetness. What did you do with the bank? Somebody called for your father about a verification and it wouldn't go through. I asked, pleasantly, which bank. She moved past the question like it was furniture. There it was, the first loose thread. My freeze was invisible, private, brand new, and within 48 hours it had inconvenienced my mother. After that call I stopped being a daughter with a bad feeling and became what I actually am, a professional who documents. I bought a binder and colored tabs, green for accounts, yellow for dates, red for anything that touched money in motion, and taped a timeline inside my closet door where Eli wouldn't see it. My rule never bent. If I couldn't hold a document proving it happened, it didn't go on the wall. It was the $12,000 personal loan that stopped me cold. Opened, dispersed, and paid off faithfully, a model little loan that builds credit. I stood at the closet trying to place the date, and then I didn't have to try anymore. Eli was born that same month. I spent it in a hospital bed with a blood pressure cuff on my arm and a preeclampsia diagnosis on my chart, being told not to stand up too fast. While I was learning to nurse my son, somebody was signing my name across town for $12,000. Tuesday dinner that week was a master class, and I attended it like an anthropologist. My mother ran the table the way she runs everything. My father peeled the label off his beer bottle and contributed weather. Toward the end, I mentioned easily that some of my mail had been coming to their house by mistake, old habit from college. Could they just hand it to me unopened going forward? The table did a small, polite freeze. My mother smiled with her whole face except her eyes. Family doesn't need permission, she said, and speared a carrot. Not an apology. A policy statement. On my way to the kitchen with the dishes, I passed the china cabinet and saw it, a manila folder lying flat under napkins that were never used, one worn corner sticking out. I had my hand on the cabinet door when my mother appeared and closed it smooth as a curtain. Those napkins are for Easter, she said. It was July. The birthday planning got stranger after that. My mother asked, light as powdered sugar, whether I still kept my papers in that little gray box. She pressed about whether anyone looked in on my place while I worked nights. Then, generous as a queen, she offered to take Eli overnight the night of my party so you can relax. Every instinct I've ever trusted went quiet and cold at once. I told her Eli already had a sleepover planned with a friend's kids, which wasn't true yet, and became true one phone call later. Monday morning, instead of sleeping after my shift, I drove to the county recorder's office with a coffee and a hunch. If somebody had been moving money in my name for 12 years, somewhere there might be paper with a stamp on it, because banks like stamps. I gave the clerk $2 and my name, and she handed me the answer, a durable, general power of attorney, granted by Josephine Marsh, attorneys in fact Robert and Diane Colton, jointly and severally, full authority over accounts, loans, and property. Signed and notarized on the exact date I was in a hospital bed, wired to monitors, unable to walk to the bathroom without help. Discharged 5 days later with a newborn. The document had 2 witness lines. The second signature had gone through a bad copier at some point and come out an unreadable smear. I paid for 3 certified copies and put that fact at the top of my timeline in red, underlined twice. A power of attorney is a skeleton key. Once I knew it existed, every account, every address change, every card suddenly had a spine. I called my own credit union to make sure my actual home was safe, and the loan officer reassured me, mortgage current, title clean, then added, because small credit unions are chatty, funny timing though. We got a verification request on your property last month from another lender. Routine, but I didn't recognize the outfit. Underwriting behavior. Somewhere out there, a lender I'd never heard of was actively checking what my condo was worth. For the first time since the pharmacy line, I wasn't investigating a crime. I was interrupting one. I want to be honest about the cost, because it matters more than the paperwork. One evening, Eli wandered in while I was updating the closet door and asked why Mommy had a puzzle taped where her sweaters go. I told him it was a matching game for work. He accepted that, the way 7-year-olds accept things, and asked for the red pen when I was done. I said yes, and then stood at the bathroom sink for a long time. It wasn't the money doing that to me, broke is survivable. It was the arithmetic of trust. 12 years of Tuesday dinners, and through every single one of them, the 2 people at the head of that table knew exactly what was being written in my name and let me pass the potatoes anyway. I thought about my grandmother, my father's mother, gone a few years by then. She'd grabbed my wrist once near the end and said, "Apropos of nothing, this family eats its quiet ones. Don't be quiet the wrong way." I'd laughed it off then. Standing at that sink, I finally heard it as the warning it was. Sam came to me before I went to him, which tells you everything about Sam. He knocked 2 sharp knocks and stood on my mat with a look I recognized from work, bad news delivered carefully. "Gray sedan's been through the lot twice this week," he said. "Fella in it took pictures of your door. Both doors, front and back. I watched him line up the shot, kid. He photographed your lock. He'd written the plate number on the back of a receipt out of habit." I invited him in, made coffee, and told him a part of the truth. He listened the way good cops listen, then said the single most useful sentence anyone had offered me in 6 weeks. "You don't need a shoulder. You need a case number." He made a call to an old friend still on the job, read out the plate, and hung up. Sedans registered to a business. Locksmith outfit, commercial account. The last Tuesday dinner before my birthday was the sweetest one in years, which is how I knew we were close to something. The cake was ordered, 3 layers, lemon, don't argue. My aunt confirmed. My father had 2 beers instead of 1. Trent showed up on time for once, freshly washed truck gleaming in the driveway, holding forth about how good it ran now. "Best thing I ever did was get that loan gone." My mother smiled into the green beans, and the comment rolled by like weather. I filed it anyway. By then I filed everything. The moment that mattered came from Eli, coloring at the end of the table, who looked up at my mother with the flat candor of a second grader and asked, "Grandma, why do you have a key to my house?" My mother laughed her hostess laugh. "Family doesn't need permission, sweetheart." Driving home, it was the key itself I kept turning over. She did have one. I'd given it to her myself years earlier. What she didn't know was that I'd rekeyed both doors after my divorce. The key in her drawer opened a door that no longer existed. If she wanted into my apartment, good manners and old brass wouldn't do it. She'd need a professional. Say, one with a gray sedan. I stayed late to help with dishes, unsurprising, since the fixer always stays. My mother took a call out on the porch. For 4 or 5 minutes, I was alone in the dining room with the china cabinet. The folder was still under the Easter napkins. I opened it, because by then I had earned the looking. Page after page of ruled paper, and on every line, one signature practiced over and over. My own name. The early pages were clumsy, the loops too fat. By the last pages it was perfect, smoother than my real hand on a night shift. Rehearsal. Under the practice sheets were bank statements, and the name on them stopped my breath in a different way, my grandmother's, from her last 2 years alive. I photographed everything my phone could hold, squared the napkins, closed the glass, and was drying a pan when my mother came back in, glowing from her call. "You didn't have to stay, honey. That's what family does," I said. The next morning I stopped collecting and started filing, because evidence you're merely hoarding is just anxiety with tabs. I duplicated the whole binder, put one set in a safe deposit box with my credit union officer as a witness that it existed on that date, and went home to file the other with the FTC's identity theft reporting site. It's a thorough form. It walks you through the accounts, the dates, the amounts. Then it reached the field that stops people like me, relationship to the person who used your information. I filled it out for both of them, got a confirmation number, and wrote it on the first page of my binder like a case number, because that's what it was. I scheduled an appointment with the police department's financial crimes unit for the following week. Then the doorbell rang. Sam again, jaw set. "Sedan came back 20 minutes ago. This time the fellow measured your front door and the slider out back. Ran a tape on both, wrote it down, and left. You measure a door when you're planning to change what's on it." That Saturday I turned my condo from a home into a position, legally, calmly, with receipts. A new deadbolt on the front door. A doorbell camera. A steel bar on the slider. And then the thing I'm proudest of. I emptied the gray fireproof box. Every real document, deed, birth certificates, Eli's social security card, the certified power of attorney copies, my grandmother's savings bond, went into the safe deposit box downtown next to the duplicate binder. The gray box itself stayed exactly where it always lived, on the closet shelf, weighing exactly what it always weighed, now filled with junk mail, expired coupons, and one blank sheet of paper. If someone came for my paper life, they'd find exactly what they'd earned. Nothing. That answer arrived Sunday evening by phone, wrapped in frosting. My mother, confirming Wednesday one more time, then casual as a napkin. "Oh, and don't plan anything for us Friday. Your father has a little bank appointment Friday morning, some paperwork thing." A little bank appointment. Some paperwork thing. I told her Friday was fine. I didn't know yet what was scheduled. I only knew my mother had just told me the deadline. Between shifts that week I finally gave my grandmother's bank statements the reading they deserved. She'd spent her last 2 years living at my parents' house. I remembered her fretting that her pension kept coming up short, and the whole table chuckling, "Grandma's getting forgetful." Bless her heart, the statements didn't chuckle. They showed withdrawals month after month from an account with a caregiver card attached, small enough to look like groceries, steady enough to add up to $23,000 over 2 years. The last withdrawal cleared 4 days before she died. My grandmother hadn't been forgetful. She'd locked a $40,000 CD away years earlier that nobody could touch without her signature in person, the fortress a schoolteacher's caution built that her daughter-in-law's sweetness couldn't talk open. That CD came to me in her will. It became the down payment on my condo. She hadn't lost her money. She'd hidden the last of it from her own daughter-in-law in the one vault she trusted, and handed that vault to me. The financial crimes detective, a compact woman named Alvarez with reading glasses on a chain, read my binder for 20 minutes without speaking. Her first question wasn't about my parents. "Who else has copies?" "A bank vault," I said. She nodded once, the way I nod when a new nurse hands me a chart done right. When I told her nothing had changed in my voice, that Tuesday dinners were proceeding as usual, she said, "That's unusual. Most people can't do that." Then she slid one page back across the table, my credit union officer's note about the mystery verification request, and tapped it twice. "All of this," she said, gesturing at the binder, "is history. Prosecutable, maybe, but history. This page is different. Somebody ordered an asset check on your condo last month. That's underwriting behavior. Ms. Marsh, this isn't a case about what your parents did. It's a case about what they're doing. She kept the binder. 3 days later, she called me at work. No preamble. We found the thing that's in motion. There's a home equity loan in underwriting at a regional lender. Borrower of record, Josephine Marsh. Collateral, your condo. Application signed under the power of attorney. $85,000. Scheduled to close and fund Friday. Dad has a little bank appointment Friday morning. My mother had told me the deadline herself, wrapped in cake talk, 10 days in advance. The bank's fraud unit already had my affidavit. The loan was flagged, frozen from the inside, dead in the water, but nothing about it would look frozen from the outside. It would keep showing clear to close right up until somebody walked in Friday morning to sign. We let it look alive, Alvarez said. Frozen solid, 3 days before your birthday, and the people who built it have no idea they're already standing on the ice. I signed the supplemental affidavit that named names. Driving home, I did the math. The loan dies Friday. My birthday dinner is Wednesday. Whatever my mother still needed from inside my apartment, she now had a window of about 48 hours to get it. And she'd already reserved the table. My mother called Monday to walk me through the birthday itinerary like a cruise director. Dinner at 6:30, cake at 4, just family, sweetheart, and then, gliding midstream, Friday morning your dad and I have our little bank thing, and after that, honey, everything is going to be so much lighter around here. So much lighter. I looked out at the parking lot where Eli's bike lay on its side in the grass and kept my voice in its lane. That's great, Mom. Lemon sounds perfect. She had no idea the loan under her Friday was already dead. There was still one piece I couldn't see, what exactly Wednesday night was actually for. The day before my birthday, my father came to my condo alone, which had happened maybe 4 times in 5 years. He brought a small box of screws for a shelf I'd mentioned months earlier and stood on my mat turning his cap in his hands. We talked about nothing for 2 minutes, and the whole time his eyes kept sliding to the door, the hinge side, the strike plate, the shining new deadbolt. Put in new hardware, he finally said, so carefully casual it nearly broke my heart. Locks were out, I said. He nodded at the deadbolt like it was a dog that might bite, and for about 2 seconds something moved behind his face, something almost like a warning trying to find a door out. It didn't find one. He handed me the screws and drove off. That night my doorbell camera pinged at 9:41. The gray sedan again, rolling slow. 3rd pass. Whatever was coming now knew about the deadbolt too. That night my kitchen hosted the strangest planning meeting of my life, an ER nurse, a retired sergeant, and a financial crimes detective drinking decaf around a table with one of Eli's crayon drawings still on it. Sam had heard, through a locksmith friend, about a commercial job booked for Wednesday evening, a full rekey at my address, ordered by a woman describing herself as the family's property manager, the unit owner conveniently away at a family event. Alvarez set down her mug. That's the window. She needs what's in that firebox before Friday's closing. Your dinner isn't a party. It's an alibi she's throwing for you. A rekey ordered by a non-owner, entry attempted into the unit. That's when a paper case becomes handcuffs if we're there to witness it. Nobody touches your home. The plan had one moving part, and it was me. I said it before anyone else had to. The only night they're certain I'm out of that apartment, with witnesses all evening, is Wednesday. So I go to my birthday dinner, and I smile, and I eat the lemon cake. I want to be clear, I set no trap. I invented nothing. They built the schedule themselves, booked the locksmith themselves, chose my birthday themselves. All I declined to do was warn them. That night I finally cross-checked my grandmother's statements against the family calendar because I knew it would cost me. It did. The withdrawals began the year she moved in, modest, plausible. Then, the next year, the amounts crept up, and twice that year the account shows declined attempts, briefly locked, then unlocked again within days. She'd fought. 83 years old, no computer, no ally in the house, and she still called somebody, still locked that account, twice, before a honeyed voice got it unlocked again. And through all of it, she never stopped protecting the CD. There was one more thing in those photographs I needed to sit with before Wednesday. Beneath my grandmother's statements, at the very bottom of the folder, someone had kept an old archive from years earlier, a foreclosure notice on my father's small shop, and behind it, a handwritten draft in his blocky pencil, begging a bank officer for any terms that would let him keep the house, because his mother lived with them now and his kids shouldn't have to change schools. In the margin, in my mother's handwriting, small and final as a stamp, asterisk stop begging. I'll handle it, asterisk somewhere in that year. My father knelt down in pencil, and my mother stepped over him and took the family books, and he was so relieved to be spared the shame that he never asked how she handled anything again. It explained him, the peeled beer labels, the weather talk, the eyes that always slid away. For about a minute, I felt genuinely sorry for him. A drowning man grabbing the first rope, even one with a hook in it. But shame explains the first signature. It doesn't explain the next 11 years of them. Wednesday came up hot and blue, ordinary. I made pancakes. Eli did his first full lap around the parking lot without a foot down while Sam called out invented lap times and the dog refereed from the grass. Packing his overnight bag felt like the only part of the plan that mattered. At his friend's door, I hugged him longer than the occasion called for, and he squirmed free the way 7-year-olds are supposed to, and I drove away with my hands steady on the wheel. I had an hour before getting dressed, and I spent it on a final pass through the binder. That's when I found the page I'd almost skimmed past, a credit bureau notice, 5 weeks old, a hard inquiry triggered by a card application. The name on the inquiry wasn't mine. It was Eli's, my 7-year-old son. The same move they'd run on me, and they hadn't even waited for him to lose his baby teeth. I froze his credit at all 3 bureaus in 11 minutes flat, photographed every confirmation screen, and called Alvarez, who went quiet for a second, which, from her, is a lot. Add it to the affidavit, she said. A minor changes things. Judges read that page first. She called back for the final walkthrough. Her people would be in the lot by 6. My job was a list of nothing. Arrive, be seen, be ordinary, keep my face on. Whatever happens at that table, she said, whoever stands up, wherever your brother goes, let it happen. Don't warn them, don't stall them, don't help them either. You're not an officer. You're a guest at your own birthday. The only thing you can do wrong tonight is participate. I told her I'd spent 34 years training for the role of a woman at a table saying nothing. Then go graduate, she said, and hung up. I parked behind my aunt's car and sat for one breath, looking at the house I grew up in, porch light on, dining room glowing gold, my mother's silhouette crossing the window with a stack of good plates. Somewhere across town, a locksmith van was checking its clock. So was Alvarez. So was I. My mother opened the door before I knocked. There's my birthday girl. She smelled like perfume and lemon frosting, and I hugged her back and felt, through the familiar wool of her cardigan, how small she actually is, this woman who'd rearranged 12 years of my life with a landline and a pen. The house was staged to the rafters, iron tablecloth, good plates, candles on the sideboard. My aunt held me at arm's length, said I looked tired in the way that means loved, and slipped me a card she didn't want my mother to see, because she's always understood the house rules better than anyone. My father, stationed at the grill, said, "Hey kiddo, happy birthday," to a spot slightly left of my eyes. My brother came last, freshly showered, and ruffled my hair like I was 9, and I let him, and something in my chest took a note and put it away. Dinner ran like one of my mother's productions always runs, on time, on script. My father built a small pile of beer label shavings beside his plate, quieter even than usual. My brother kept sneaking looks at his phone in his lap, then the kitchen clock, then my mother, a triangle he flew maybe 5 times between the roast and the salad. My mother stood, dinged her glass, and gave the toast, and she's good. I want that on the record. She talked about family being the only thing that lasts, about how proud she was of our Josephine, our nurse, and landed it with her arms spread the width of the room. Everything you have, Josephine, came from this family. I raised my glass with the rest of them and drank it down, looking her in the eye. Only 2 people at that table knew what the sentence actually meant. One of us was smiling into a wine glass. The other kept checking the kitchen clock. Between the roast and the cake, my phone buzzed once against my leg. I excused myself to the hall bathroom and locked the door. 2 photographs from Alvarez. The first, a clean scan of the power of attorney's second witness line, resolved at last from the notary's own retained file. In a slanting hand I would have known anywhere on this earth, my brother's signature, dated the same day I was in that hospital bed. The second, a loan payoff record from 9 days later, an $11,000 truck loan settled in full in a single payment from my parents' account. Best thing I ever did, getting that loan gone. I'd been riding in the bed of that lie for 7 years. $11,000. That's the number my brother sold me for. Something in my chest didn't break the way I'd braced for. It just went quiet and efficient and filed him under a new tab. I washed my hands, came back smiling, and watched my mother lean toward my father's ear as the candles went into the cake. I knew the sentence before she said it. Since everyone's here, have your son changed the locks at her apartment? My father's jaw worked once, like a man swallowing a pill without water. He gave the smallest nod I've ever seen a grown man produce and touched my brother's shoulder, reaching past him for the coffee. And my brother, witness number 2, best thing I ever did, set down his napkin, stood, said he had to take a call about a job estimate, and was already thumbing his keyring out of his pocket. One shiny new key that fit nothing yet. The screen door clapped shut behind him, and his headlights swung out toward Birchwood Court, toward my home, toward the firebox full of expired coupons, the deadbolt he didn't know about, the camera already awake, and 2 unmarked cars sitting dark in the summer evening. I ate my slice of lemon cake. I told my aunt it was the best one the bakery had ever made, and meant it. My mother relaxed by degrees, chattering about Friday being a fresh start. The kitchen clock ticked. When headlights finally came back up the driveway, they came fast. The front door opened hard enough to knock the wreath askew, and my brother came into that dining room the way trauma cases come through the ER doors, moving fast, already too late. His face had gone the color of hospital sheets. He crossed to my mother's chair, bent to her ear, and tried to whisper, but the room had gone silent the moment they saw him, and every person at that table heard him say, "Mom, there were police at her building." They stopped the locksmith in the lot. They had paper, a warrant, a detective. They knew my name when I got out of the truck. They knew about Friday. The room did not explode. The first second is pure vacuum. My aunt's hand stopped halfway to her mouth. My father went gray around the lips and placed both hands flat on the tablecloth, a man bracing a table that wasn't moving. My mother smiled. It hung on her face a full second past its expiration, her eyes going around the table doing arithmetic. Then my father's phone rang against the wood, too loud, and he flinched like it had teeth. The screen sat face up, the bank's regional office, calling on a Wednesday night, 2 days early. He didn't answer. It rang itself out into voicemail in front of 11 silent people. And into that ringing, my mother turned, not to her husband, not to her son standing wrecked at her shoulder, but to me, still seated, napkin in my lap, because she knew before a single card was shown. She stood so fast her chair barked against the floor. "What did you do?" Low first, then rising. "You called the police on your own family. Everything I have done for this family. Everything you have came from this family." I stayed in my chair, hands folded, and use the voice I use at 2 in the morning when a family is screaming at a monitor, the one that doesn't need to rise. You're right, Mom. Even the debt. I didn't call the police on my family. I filed a report about 2 people who forged my name while I was in a hospital bed having your grandson. I set 1 page on the tablecloth and slid it toward the middle. That's a credit inquiry from 5 weeks ago. Run on a 7-year-old. Pass it around. My aunt read it first and set it down like it was hot. He is 7, she said, in a voice I'd never heard from her. My mother didn't look at the page. That told the room more than the page did. She swung between registers looking for one that still worked, tears, then blame. Your father handled the accounts. Ask him. And my father, Gray, both hands still flat on the table, spent the only honest sentence I've ever heard him volunteer. She's telling the truth. All of it. It was 12 years late, but the room heard it. My brother stood wrecked by the china cabinet, and I looked at him last. 11,000 for your signature. You want to know what it bought? Ask my son. My mother made her last stand from the high ground that had already fallen. I am your mother. This is my house, and family doesn't need permission. I stood, finally, unhurried, and collected my purse. It does now, I said. It's called a warrant. Nobody followed me to the kitchen except my aunt. I took the cake box off the counter, more than half the lemon cake left, and she didn't say a word about it, just opened the back door. I bought my own cake once when I was 12, I told her, with babysitting money, because that year's budget was tight. Tonight, I'm just taking what's mine. She put both hands on my face. You call me whenever. I mean it. I drove home with the windows down and the cake belted into the passenger seat like a good citizen. The parking lot was quiet, the locksmith van long gone, one unmarked car still sitting patient at the far end. At his window, backlit by a lamp, Sam gave me the small, formal nod of a sergeant at shift's end. My new deadbolt turned like silk. The first door that was ever only mine. The next 2 weeks moved the way justice actually moves on paper at printer speed. Identity fraud, forgery, and theft charges against my mother. Forgery and complicity against my father. The manila folder came out of the china cabinet in an evidence bag, practice pages and all. My brother came in with a lawyer on day 3, told all of it, and signed on as a cooperating witness, which bought him a misdemeanor and a debt no court can schedule. The $85,000 loan never funded. My title stayed clean. Every dollar came off my name, account by account, each deletion filed behind its own red tab. At her arraignment, my mother told the judge it was all a family misunderstanding. The system she'd gamed for 12 years finally read her file. 3 months later, on a bright Saturday morning, my whole world fit inside one parking lot, and it was enough. Eli did bike laps faster now, cornering like he was born to it, while Sam called out lap times he was clearly inventing. My mail comes to one address now, mine, and I open every envelope the day it arrives, which sounds small unless you've lived the story, in which case you know it's the whole prize. My aunt calls every Sunday. We talk about raccoons and rising bread and spelling tests, which is its own kind of medicine. Family, it turns out, was never the people at the head of the table. It's the ones who stand up from it when the truth arrives. I told Eli the truth in the size he could carry. Grandma did something dishonest with Mommy's name, and it's grown-up trouble, and none of it, not 1 ounce, was his fault. He thought about it for a day, asked if the dog could come to his birthday, and moved on, because 7-year-olds have perfect instincts for what actually matters. His credit stays frozen until he's 18. My grandmother's savings bond hangs framed above my desk now, not for the money, for the signature. Hers and only hers on her own paper. Last week Eli asked why it was up there. I told him a smart, quiet woman kept one thing safe her whole life and gave it to us. Like a treasure? Exactly like a treasure, baby. The lemon cake, for the record, was gone in 2 days. I've ordered my own from that bakery every summer since. 3 layers, lemon, Don't argue. It tastes better when your name on the receipt is the only place your name is working. I used to think love meant handing people your keys and hoping. Now I know love is the one thing in this world that never needs to practice your signature.